This week we're going to go over some Viper 4 stuff, mainly kind of granular application. We're just going to kind of start from the top and work down. We're not going to get into a lot of machine setup. It's kind of more of a use case. Basically, what you see on your screen here now, if you haven't seen it prior to now, this is 2.4 software running on the Viper 4. It does have the new street maps. You can see I got field boundaries loaded on my street maps on the main run screen. A little bit different look here on the home screen. We got our street maps in the middle and traditional job start with the tractor. If you want more information on downloading the street maps, you can go to our ravenhelp.com website and then to our knowledge base articles. Type in Viper 4 street maps and you can see the instructions how to download them from the Slingshot website and install them on your Viper 4. Currently the 2.4 software is not released. Right now we don't have any intention of releasing 2.4 because we're working on our next release already. That'll be coming up in the next month or so. So this is a beta software that can be downloaded on ravenhelp.com as a beta. Just go under you have to create a user login and then just log in and download that software if you want to install it on your Viper 4. Alright, so the first thing we're going to talk about here is right at the top. You may see administrator on the top of your panel, or you might see your user. I got a user profile set up for myself. This is where the applicator can set up their information on the system. So all this will go into the reporting portion, and it all is optional. There's no requirement to put any of this information into the system. Kind of what it allows you to do is you can identify the user by using logins. So you can switch users, or the user can log in at the beginning of the day, or they can switch users through the day. So their reporting information is correct. To start out here, we're going to jump right into File Manager because we're going to bring in a variable rate map, an RX map that we're going to use later. We're going to come down to File Manager, and our File Manager page, we're going to see on the left side of the screen all the files that are on our Viper 4. If you're not finding a file that should be there, or you want to filter, we got the funnel up here at the top. If something isn't showing up, make sure that you don't have something selected here because it's only going to show what's filtered. So you may have to clear that out if you previously have used it. Sometimes it kind of stays there. It gets kind of stuck if you're bringing in and out of files, so you might have to remove that file type. So all the files that are on the system are on the left side. If we want to work with a specific file, we can use the arrows to move them to the right side, or we can use the double arrows at the top to move all of our files over to the right side so we can work with them. From there, we can either edit files, delete our files, or if we go to the folder option, that's going to give us the option to export any of them files to possibly a USB drive. If you want to move any files back to the other side that we don't want to work with, maybe we put the wrong file over there, we can hit the X. That does not delete them, that just moves them back to the left side. Or if we hit the X at the top here, that'll move everything back over to the other file column. Next we're going to come up to the top here and we're going to go to the USB. And this is how we're going to bring files into our Viper 4. Select our USB drive, and we do have a drop down for that because we can have two USBs installed at the same time. And then we're just going to simply go find the file type that we want to import. I'm going to select RX maps, arrow to the right, and now I can navigate within my USB drive to find my RX map files. I have a folder created here with my RX maps in it, so I can select on it. And now on the bottom half of the screen, all the files within that folder that are variable rate files or RX files are going to show up. Any non-variable rate files that are in this folder won't show up on this screen. So we can either do a select all, or we can go through and select specific files. And we have two options. We can either copy or move. The left side is a copy, which is what I would recommend. That'll leave the original one on your USB drive. And as you see here, I've already imported these files, so it's going to give me some options to copy and replace, don't copy, or rename and keep both files, just similar to what you'd find on your computer. I'm just going to hit don't copy. The next tab over we're going to talk about here is just going to be some file transfer history from Slingshot. And the fourth tab is a simple checkbox. If we are using Slingshot, this isn't going to automatically select the option at the end of the job. The user can still uncheck that if he's not done with the job and doesn't want that file to send, but this is just a default check for the end job. You'll see something else new here. We got an option for export GFF, grower farm field data, to a USB as an ISO task data. This is an easy way to take all the grower farm field information, do it as an ISO task data file to your USB drive, so you can bring it into another Viper 4 with 2, 3, or higher software. If we're going to bring that data back in, we're going to do that the same way like we do any other file. We're going to go to our USB drive, scroll down until we find our ISO task data, and the system's going to go automatically out and look for that task data XML file and give you an option to bring it in. My USB drive doesn't have that file on it right now, so it's going to give us an error. The neat thing about the ISO task data, this gives us an option to create that folder structure in a GIS software program. There's some different companies out there that offer this option, so you can create it in your software program and bring all your grower farm field data in as one file. One thing to keep in mind about this information is only be edited on the device that created it. So the software is the device that created it if you're using a software program. So the Viper for itself cannot change that data. That's to keep the round trip information, so it keeps the structure intact. From there, that kind of covers our quick file manager segment, and we're going to jump into basically using the Viper 4. As we're coming into the season here, probably the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to take a look at our machine setup, make sure all of our numbers are correct. So we can go down to our settings, our node with our gear, and your current machine is going to be right in the top center. I just did a generic air machine. We're going to do a 2-boom setup. So we're just going to touch right on our machine itself, and that's going to open up all of our machine information. We got our general information, our measurements. Now keep in mind with the Viper 4, it is different than the Invisio Pro or Viper Pro. All of our measurements are in relation to the rear axle. So our GPS measurement is not from the boom. We're measuring from the rear axle to our GPS location. Then my section group, I'm going to go into edit. Now in our section group, that's where we're going to put our location of our application point from the center axle to our boom location. Mine is behind the machine, 65 inches. In the last tab, that's going to be our section setup. I have 2 sections set up, both 420 inches. I have a 70-foot machine, and I have changed my section labels for left and right. Otherwise, normally by default it'd be 1 and 2. So if we're going to swipe left to right, this is where we're going to find our guidance information. We automatically pull that boom width in and put it into our overall width. If the user wants to change his guidance width, the distance between his AV lines, something other than what our actual width is, we can put a check and override, and then we can manually go in there and change that width to whatever the user wants it to be. And once that check mark is taken out, it's going to automatically go back to our original width. So once our machine is, we verify our machine settings, our machine is set up correctly, then we can go down to our widgets. This is going to be the rest of our setup for our nodes and the rest of our system. If we're using AccuBoom, we can have our checkbox for AccuBoom enabled. That's going to enable it for all products. I have a 2-product machine set up today. We have our look ahead at the option. One thing to remember on this page, we also have an apply to all products check mark. That does not apply to AccuBoom enabled. That only relates to the settings, the look ahead options at the bottom of the screen. So this gives us the ability, if need be, to have different look ahead options for different nodes on our machine or different products. Typically, we're going to have them the same, so I'm going to have it selected to apply to all products so they stay the same. From there, we're going to move down to boom capacity. The boom capacity is a feature that basically allows us to monitor the volume per minute going through our boom. Some of your machines, they have probably limitations to how much they can put out in pounds per minute. Either they may plug, they may throw it over the conveyor, they may distort pattern. So this gives you an option to enter a number in there. So you can use a bar graph on your screen. It's going to tell you when you're approaching that danger mark or where your preset is. This is really valuable if you're doing a lot of VRA. As you're jumping into different rate zones, this will give you that visual to say that, hey, I'm getting to the limitations of what my machine can apply. I need to slow down. From here, we're just going to move over, and I'm going to set up my on-screen switch box. What the on-screen switch box does, this is our switch box for AccuBoom, where we can override our sections on, off, or into Accu position. This is real handy if you have a spinner machine. You can set up that spinner section as its own section, and if we're controlling spinner speed, and then you can override that on so AccuBoom's not controlling that spinner. I'll show you a little bit more about the on-screen switch box once we get in within a job. This does have to be set up by user. It's optional and is not a required setting. If you don't set it up, you won't have the option to use it in the job. We're going to go right over to product control, and we're going to go over our product settings. These can be our node settings. So at the top of the page, we have different tabs for different settings. Left-hand side, we got our 2 different nodes. So usually I just work each node, do node 1, node 2 as I work across the top of the tabs. So the first one, we're set to granular 1. We got a single belt, single encoder. From the drop down there, we have a lot of different options. The timed application, that's another granular setting. That's a user set with our 2-bend machine. Basically, it's a time that how long it takes it to get from the box to the distribution point. Like here, where I might have an insert, these numbers may be different for each bend. Depends on how long it takes for it to get to its distribution point. Some of our OEM partners may have some recommendations for you, some starting points. Otherwise, from that point, it's basically a user set number to fine tune that. Bend level and bend capacity are optional. I'm leaving them at 0. Bend level is just how much product you have in your bend in pounds. Capacity would be your total, how much does your bend hold. My rate bump, that's just if I'm using the on-screen rate bump. Each time I hit that up and down arrow, how much is my rate going to change? So that if we move over to the next tab at the top, that's going to be our valve settings. I'm set to PWM closed for both products. Under our valve cal, we got 2 little options right next to there. We can manually change our valve cal. There's also a reset valve cal, the arrow going counterclockwise if we change that and want to go back to the original value. And then we also got a settings icon. So if we touch on the settings, that's going to give you the user a visual of what each digit does. So if they're making changes to their system and don't quite, what digit does what, this is going to give you an idea of what each one does. So with the PWM valve, our first digit is just going to be how far we start to break percentage-wise from our target rate. Second digit is just a rate tolerance. Within 1%, where don't we adjust? If we get that too tight, you might see the rate jumping around all the time, may not want to lock on. Based on how many pounds per acre, sometimes we got to tune these valves to get the optimal performance out of our machine. Valve cal 2, we normally don't have a recommendation for that. It's going to vary on your valve type. Some of the OEMs may provide you a recommendation when to use and what number to put into this valve cal 2. Valve delay, I don't think in most granular situations we're not going to utilize the valve delay. And then we also got our PWM settings and smart control. Smart control is a PWM smart control, and that's only with a PWM valve. If we go through the PWM settings and do the auto calibration for each of our nodes on the system with PWM valve, the system's going to automatically determine preset settings for your preset PW. They're kind of behind the scenes settings. The user doesn't see them, but when the smart control is enabled, the system's going to determine which preset I should use to quickly achieve rate. This may not work for all applications, but it does help in a lot of cases. So it's just an easy checkbox once we've done the auto calibration to toggle that on and off, and may help your system performance. So the PWM calibration, we can manually change our PWM values, our max, how far our valve can go open. Our preset, the first place our valve is going to go once we turn the master on, and the minimum, basically the floor, how far do we want that valve to close during normal operation. The frequency is just the coil frequency, and here's the option for the auto calibration. The demo here we have today, we can't go through that process, but if you can select through there, it's kind of a wizard that's going to walk you through the steps to how to do that. You're going to run your machine operating speed, the belts are going to run. You'd want to do this without product in your machine during the calibration process. And basically the system is going to determine that max and min PW for you, kind of where the system responds. And that would have to be done for every node that's on your system. So you'd have to do that separately for node 1 or node 2. Moving across the top, next tab over, that's going to be our density, pounds per cubic foot of our product. We got a fan spot to enter fan cal. This is where we're monitoring fan speed, not controlling fan speed. So we just put the number of points that our sensor is reading off of, which is usually 2 or 4, depends on your machine. The next box down is just going to display our current fan RPM. And then lastly at the bottom there is our spreader constant. You can manually input this number. If you're in US units, it's pulses per cubic feet, or if we're in metric, it's pulses per 100 liters. There's also a little icon there for the spreader constant assistant. This is a process that will walk you through kind of an auto calibration. You're going to weigh the product. There's 2 ways this can kind of be done. You can either have, multiple ways. You can have a machine on the scale and you're putting a decreasing weight, taking product out of the machine, or you can do an increasing weight, either way. But once again, we can't show this process today with the demo, but if you do go back to that public knowledge base, we do have an article on there that'll walk you through utilizing that spreader constant calibration widget. Kind of go through a couple scenarios there, how you can, the process to go through and get that calibration number. Keep in mind, whenever you're doing a spreader catch test, You always want to make sure you charge your system prior to do that, so you're got a full conveyor prior to starting. Then we're going to jump over from here. We're going to jump over to the pressure settings because we're not going to have any with a granular system. And we're going to go right over to our boom association, our section settings. These are which boom sections are associated with which product. We got two icons in the bottom. We can either deselect all or select all. So you can see the different colors there as they're selected. So with my air machine, my boom machine here, I'm going to have both sections selected for both products. If you have that spinner machine, you might see something different. You might see one boom associated with one product, and if my node 2 is my spinner, I would have the other section associated with the spinner. So you might have different sections associated with different products when you get a spinner type of setup. The last tab, that's going to be our alarm settings. We can set a low tank, low flow limit, our operate %, that's what color or when is our system going to alarm us, how far off target rate, and a dual flow %. The dual flow % is always going to show up in any granular type, but currently it's only used in a Gran 3 application. It's ignored in any other application type. If we have bend level sensors, we're going to want to have them enabled so we can see once the product falls below that bend level sensor. So that's basically kind of what you got to look at for setup. So the next thing I want to jump into the product profiles. It's another optional feature you can use. Probably a lot of people don't think of using them in granular. You can for reporting purposes, or there's some nice tools here we can use. Just give you some visuals for the user in a job. Or we do have the ability with the Viper 4 if we do have the multi-bend machines. If we name all of our bends the same, or whichever bends we name the same, if we got more than 2, the system's going to automatically chain them together for you. I'm going to create a new one here, and I'm going to call it my bend group. So I'm not going to really use it for product naming, but I can also use it to identify my bends. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on my mix name, and I already have this set up, so I'm going to name product 1 bend 1, and I'm going to do product 2 bend 2. So what this is going to allow me to do is if I'm not using the product profile, I get a visual of which bend is which product is which bend. Maybe you want to do front bend, back bend, sky's the limit, whatever you want to name it. So there's one scenario we could do. Otherwise we can do a product name. So if I name them both the same as I did with my urea, the system's going to automatically chain both my bends together when I open the job. Or if I'm going to do the reporting side, I might name them by product. Bend 1 I have urea, bend 2 I have my DAP. So there's a lot of different flexibility a user can do to utilize this functionality. You can drill it down and bring your products in and put quantities in and all that kind of stuff. If you want to drill it down that far for reporting, you can create blends. However, there's a lot of flexibility you can do here. So right now I'm just going to go back to my bend group, just a simple 2-product setup, and I'm going to touch back on my street map tab. And now we got 2 options now with this new software. We can either, if we got our boundaries on here, you can touch on within that boundary. Actually I got 2 intersecting boundaries here evidently because it shows up twice, but I can touch on one of them. And I can begin a job right from here by using that boundary, or go back to open an existing job that was created with that boundary. That's going to be the same. We can do it from the traditional, go to the tractor and do the traditional start job. And from here we can go, if we have scout groups, we can come into here and manually load them. But what we did do, if the user is utilizing grower farm field functionality, which we can load from the top of the screen, when I load that grower farm field, I can also come over to my scout group, and now I can filter by grower farm field. So only my scout files that show up with that are associated with that grower farm field will show up in my drop-down list. We can do the same thing with guidance patterns if we're reusing 18 lines, and we can do the same with RX maps. But of course, that RX map at some point is going to have to be associated to a grower farm field. We can name our job. We're going to do a default date and time, but we can change that so we can identify that field later if need be, if we're not utilizing the grower farm field. We're going to show you what we can do if we're going to do a traditional rate job. We can touch on our rate, enter our target rate, or here I'm going to load a VRA job, so I'm going to touch on my target, change it from fixed rate to RX map, select my RX map name, and this again we can do the filter by GFF. I'm going to select my urea. We have to choose a rate column because it depends on how the VRA map was created. You can actually get multi-column shape files. You might have that urea, the DAP, lime, whatever. You can have a lot of different products associated with that one file. This one here just has 2 show up Of course, we got to select the 4600. That's my rate field for this map. We also have a conversion factor. It's going to default to 1. The conversion factor is a tool that we can utilize. We see most commonly somebody might create a line recommendation in tons and not pounds. The system is set up to apply in pounds. Convert that tons recommendation to pounds. So if we would enter a conversion factor of 2,000. The user isn't sure what number to use. There's a little gear there to kind of give you some conversion numbers to utilize if we got to convert to different units. The other tool this can be used is applicator gets to the field and the grower decides I only want to put 80% of what that map was made on. I'm just going to cut back this year due to cost, or maybe I didn't have just such a good crop last year, I got a little extra there. So you can use this as a percentage, so you can basically create that map, change the value of what that map was created to into just a multiplication factor. So you do a lot of different numbers there. But we're going to default that to 1. Now the default rate, pounds per acre, that's going to be if we need to apply outside of our VRA map. Maybe the field got a little bigger on one side and we just want to put a fixed amount on that outside the map. Or we can see this valuable, maybe the map was created in imagery and the boundaries aren't correct. We got a shift, maybe part of the field is out in the center of the road and we got a gap on the other side. This gives the applicator an opportunity to put a number in there and apply something to that outside that map. This value can also be set within a job, so if we get the job open and then notice that map isn't quite right or we got an area outside the map, we can go into our RX widget and change this value at any time. The reference point, this is what we're looking at to change rates. Default is boom center, so the center of the boom, that location, once that boom is into that RX zone, that's when we're going to change rate. There's also an option here for boom minimum. What boom minimum does, if you're over 2 rate zones, we're going to put the lower of the 2 rate zones on. That's going to be our application rate. That's non-zero. So that RX map is loaded, so now that's going to show up in my target rate. We'll load one here quick for the product 2. We're going to load our DAP over on this one. Select our rate field. I'm going to leave my conversion factor and boom center. And at this point here, we're ready to open a job. So I already got my screen widget laid out here. We can talk a little bit more about some of these widgets here in a little bit. You can see my RX map and my boundary. I'm going to go to the field review screen, go to the second one from the left, and that's going to pull my whole field into view. I got my extends option and the little map with a square around it. Vehicle location. In the lower left corner as well. So I'm going to go to the extends and look at that map. And now if you want to see what each one of these rate zones is, we can touch on that rate zone. It's going to give us a rate or boundary area. Actually, I got 2 boundaries here. That's why you see it doubled up. We got 200 rate zone up here. Now that's selected for our Ben 1 or urea product. So I'll touch my rate box up here and change it to Ben 2. And I can do the same thing over here. Okay, we're going to go back to the downfield view or the guidance view. We got an hourglass and the magnifying glass in the lower left corner. We can change our zoom level or our view. Here you see my switch box we talked about. I can override on, so I can sit here, see my sections turn green, my boom turns green. I can override everything off, or I can go back to AccuControl. And I can do that for individual section as well. This is where if you have that spinner machine, you can set that spinner to on all the time, and we can leave our belts in Accu. Alright, the other thing that we kind of handy on the screen, I actually got a couple different application widgets or rate boxes on here. I got the multi-product rate box, so we got both Ben 1, Ben 2 on the same widget. Or we also got, we can add multiple single rate box widgets as well. The other thing I got on here, I got a couple pump switches. The pump switches, you can assign that to a specific product just like you do the rate widgets by touching and holding on them. But the pump switches allow us to do, it's an easy toggle to take that product from off to auto. There's another function that we'll show here in a little bit when we get into Ben chaining, is it'll also give you the ability to see which chain is active. The widget next to there, that's that boom capacity widget. We select our boom, enable it, and that's going to give you a percentage of where we are within that preset volume per minute that we set. Are we in our green, or are we getting into our caution or our red zone? It's not an audible alarm, it is only a visual. Then we also can use an RX widget. You got it up in the upper left corner. We can enable 0 rate shutoff. We can set a on look ahead. This is for RX look aheads. How far do we want to look ahead for that next rate change, that next zone? The user's driving 20 mile an hour down the field. We got to have that machine look ahead so we can get prepared to for when that zone is coming up. And then right below that, we can set that default rate so where you can apply outside of our RX map. But of course, if we got using the zone map, you're going to have to probably disable AccuBoom to do that. We have apply to all products, so them values apply that we set in the on and the default to both products, or we can set them individually if that is not checked. Okay, so we're going to do real quick here. Bottom right corner, you see our new guidance widget. If you've been running older software, we do have the newer last pass 2 pattern. Really handy if you're trying to do row spraying or swathing back and forth. But otherwise, jump into kind of how to add some widgets if you're not familiar with the screen. So we're going to come down lower right corner. We got our widget configuration. I got a whole bunch of different configurations set up here, but I'm going to hit my plus to add a new one. I'm going to name that, and then I go down to the edit. And being I created a new one, I got a blank screen. There's nothing on my screen at this time. So I'm going to come down here to the add, the plus in the lower right corner, and that's going to take us to our widget glossary. This is all the different widgets we can add to our screen. Basically, you touch on a widget, press and hold it. It's going to add to the gray screen, and then you can drag it to whichever location you want to put that widget. Then we're going to go back and add, and we can continue to go through the widget library and do the same thing. Press and hold on it so it adds, and then drag it to where you want it to be on the screen. If we put something on here, we decided we didn't want it, you can tap on it again, get a garbage can, and delete that widget off. Once we're done, we go back down to the lower right corner. We got the widget return. It takes us back to our widget options, and then hit the green in the upper right corner, and that takes us back to our job screen. All right, I'm going to go out. We're going to close this job, and then we're going to jump into some bin chaining. So we're going to go down to the home, and first page that comes up is just kind of an application report, and here's the little box, send a slingshot. We talked about in the user settings where we could have that check marked. If I had left that selected, this would be automatically checked. We have a second page if we want to put in weather information, whether we have a watchdog weather station, or if we manually input this data. We're going to hit the stop to end the job in the lower right corner. Now, as far as bin chaining, there's 2 different ways we can do bin chaining. I'm going to show you the manual chain first here, and then we'll get into the automatic bin chaining where the system automatically does it for you. We're going to go to the start job. This little icon on the tank assignment line, that's our bin chain. It's grayed out right now because we don't have anything actively chained. So we're going to touch on that. We're going to create a manual group. So we're going to put a check in manual group. And then the top line, that's our chain. We're going to add a chain, so we're going to hit the plus. We're going to select a primary product, which one is going to empty first. I'm going to do a non-traditional. I want to empty my back bin first, so I'm going to go to bin 2. Then we're going to get an option for a bin chain name and a short name. It's going to default to whatever bin you started the chain in, but we do have the ability to change this naming. This is what the user is going to see within a job. I'm going to change mine to urea, so that's the product I'm going to apply. We're going to hit the green check, and that's going to take us back to our management screen. We see a couple pluses. Here's under bin 2, that was my chain. Here's my name, my short name. We got bin 2. Under chains, at the top, this is where it gets a little confusing. We have another plus here. That is if we're going to add another chain. To have another chain, we'd have to have at least a 4 product machine and have 2 links in each one. So we're not going to touch on that. We're going to come down to our chain or links. We want to create links within our chain, and we're going to hit the plus right next to our node 2. Since my product names don't match, it's going to give me a warning. That's okay. I'm going to proceed. I'm going to hit yes, and then I'm going to look for my product. I named mine bin 1, bin 2. Nothing shows up because they don't match. So if nothing shows up or the product you're looking for doesn't show up under the product, you may have to come and unselect some filters to get the products to show up. So we added that product, so now we have node 2 is going to go first, node 1 is going to go second, 2 links within that one chain. At the bottom of the screen, we're going to have some advanced methods. This is how we're going to trigger between bin 1 or bin 2. I'm going to set for bin level sensor, so I'm going to leave only that checked, and then we're going to hit the return. So now I only see one line because we're running basically 2 products as one. So I got my bin chain. It's got a link here at the left, and if I want to, I can go back and I can load that VRA map, or I can do a traditional rate per acre, and I'm in my job. So now I decided I'm going to do bin 2 first, so I'm going to touch on my pump switch, enable bin 2, or we can touch on our rate widget and put it to auto from here. Either way can be done. So if you got multiple widgets, you might see that some of them might be grayed out because we're doing 1 product and not 2. And we're also going to utilize our bin chain widget down here right above our guidance widget. This is a multi-function widget. We can press and hold on it, and it opens up. We can change our active product. We can change our advanced method, And we also have some actions at the bottom there. What are we going to do once our advanced method has been met? We're going to shut down the chain, or we're going to start a cleanout process, or we can also delay the chain shutdown. The delayed chain shutdown is going to be a time factor. If that bend sensor is high in the bend and we get a lot of product left in the bottom, you can put maybe 5 seconds in there to allow that chain to run an additional amount of time to get some of that extra product out of there. But keep in mind, there's a risk of doing that. That bend might go empty before that time expires. So it might have to be a user set value. The other things our chain widget can do is it's a multifunction. So a chain does not go in a circle. Once we empty, in this case, bend 2, and then we empty bend 1, we're going to have to manually reset that chain to the original order if we have more application to do, if we got to go back and reload. So we got to set it back to the original order so we can go bend 2 and bend 1 again. If we forget to do that, it's just going to run out bend 2 in this case, or actually bend 1, because that would have been the last bend in the chain, and it's going to shut down. It's not going to switch back. So to do that, we can either do that by doing a long press, or if we tap on the left side of this widget, it's going to ask us if we want to reset to the current chain 1 product in the first link, yes or no. I'm already set there, so I'm not going to reset it. But we're going to show you a little bit on what's going to happen when we advance through these chains. So if you watch my pump widget, bend 2 is active. That's the one I'm running out of. And once my bend level sensor should go off here. So it's going to tell me that bend 2 has been applied. Now we're link 1, the first link has been applied, and it switched to bend 1, or the second link. So number 1 is now active. Our switch turned green. So it's giving me that visual by having them pump switches on there. Which bend am I actually running out of? So I have that visual right on my screen. So my other bend sensor is going to go off here in a minute. And since I had shutdown selected, that's exactly what happened. Both my products shut off. So now if you look at my bend chain widget, the right-hand side of that is now changed from active to clean out ready. Now I might drive back to my truck and reload. I can go back and hit the left side, reset my chain order, reload, and continue to apply. But if I'm done with this field, I want to get the rest of that product out of my bend. So I can come down here, select on clean out ready. It goes to clean out active, turn my master back on, and what the system is going to do, since I have a 2-bend machine, is it's going to apply 50% out of each bend. It's going to do I have 300 pounds target. It's going to put out 150 pounds out of each bend at the same time to empty out the remainder of the contents. So if I want to go back, reset the link, I can tap on the left side, reset that link to the original order, and now we're back to number 2 will be the active product. Alright, I'm going to close this job, and I'm going to show you the auto chain, how we're going to automatically chain them together by product name. So I'm going to go up to the product profile, I'm going to touch on my bend group name, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select my urea product. So now both node 1 and node 2 are named the same, and that's in the mix name. The mix name equals each other. Come back down to my start job, and now under the tank assignment, you're going to see that link is already green. The system automatically chained them together. What it's going to do is it's going to do it in chronological order, so the lowest number is going to be first, followed by the higher numbers in sequential order. We can touch on this link just like we did before, and we can see how that setup is. We got one chain, urea. If I touch on that, it's going to tell me the order. I got node 1 and node 2, and I'm set to bend level for my advanced method. We do have the ability here, we can switch that order if we want to. If we check manual group, we're going to manually make changes, then select on our urea chain, and now we have the ability to edit. So I got node 1 first and node 2. So if I want to flip the order, at this point here, I want to do just like I did before. I want to empty node 2 or bend 2 first. I'm going to come over to here, and I got the X on node 1. Touch on my X, and it's going to delete that link out of the chain and slide node 2 over. And then I'm just going to come in here, hit the plus, remove my filter, and add product 1 back to the chain. So now we'll run in the order just like we did last time, bend 2 first, followed by bend 1. We can still load an RX map, select the rate column, and open our job. So the same thing applies. We selected node 2 first, so we'd have to enable node 2 either from the rate widget or pump switch. Same process. We just did the auto chain process. We're on chain the same. Some of the other widgets, there's a lot of them in the widget library. They also like our area widget here. A lot of them can be assigned to certain products by touching and holding on them. You can select a product, slide by map, or a certain product. I'm going to close this job and we go back to the start job screen. And now, since we auto changed, now this time here, if we didn't change that order, we're going into a new job. It's going to automatically do the number 1 and then number 2 first. We're going to start going through the questions. First one, back to the boom setup. There is a correction number left and right. Can you explain how that works? Yep, so we're going to go back to our machine. I'm going to touch on my node with the gears, tap on my machine. I'm going to get back into my machine setup. There's different places we can put numbers in, left and right, for correction. The first one is you see a center. That's if our GPS antenna isn't not in the center of the machine. Probably more referencing the question is in this area. We have an offset from rear axle. That would be kind of unique. If our boom was shifted from the center line of the machine. Probably not real common. But if we go into the boom setup, there's also some offsets down below. Top one, section offset, that's calculated when we hit the calculate offsets. The Viper figures out from the center line of the machine where is the center of that boom section. So if we go to, like our left one is going to be left 210 inches, which is half of the width of that boom, and the right one's right at 210. There's also below there, it's a little hard to see, it's cut off on my screen, but there's also another offset where we can change it from center, fore, or aft. This would be more probably common in maybe a liquid machine. There's probably some granular machines with a mid-mount boom that you'd utilize this potentially. It gives us the ability for AccuBoom to, if there's one section that is out of line with the other one, like a liquid machine. A lot of liquid machines, they got that center rack, that center section, might be a foot back from the rest of the section. So you come in here and input that distance so AccuBoom shuts that off correctly. There's also another offset spot you might see. If we go over to the guidance, there's also another offset for guidance. We can enter a number in here if it's crowding to one side or the other. It doesn't change our boom setup, it only changes our guidance setup. Next question, do I need an Ethernet cable from Slingshot to Viper 4 to transfer files via Slingshot account? If we want to send that file wirelessly, yes, we got to have an Ethernet cable, which is a special Ethernet cable for the Viper 4. It's not the standard Cat5 like our Viper Pro or Invisio Pro has. It's got a special connector on the back for the Viper 4. But if you have your job files on Slingshot, and maybe you have a unit that doesn't have a modem, you can take that RX map off a Slingshot if you don't have the raw file there, put it on a USB, and then bring it in via USB drive. There is one question on bend chaining. Same product, different constants per bend. Well, we kind of covered the second part of emptying the rear bend first. Keep in mind, when we do bend chain, your density and spreader constant is independent for the bend. So if you've been doing an application and we switch products and our density changed, you have to make sure you go in there and change it for both products, either before you enter the job or once you get into the job. So what you do is you can touch and hold on your rate box. Of course, we only got one product listed here. We can hit the blue arrow to the right, and from that main screen there, we can select on which product, and we can change that density or spreader constant for either product. The next question, importing RX map from Slingshot. On the Viper 4 side, you don't see any different. The file is going to get received by the Viper 4 over the modem, sent to the Viper over the Ethernet connection. From a user standpoint, everything's automatic at that point. It's going to automatically put that into that RX location where all your files are stored on the system for your RX maps. User has to do nothing. As far as the Slingshot side, upload them RX maps to Slingshot to send them. You do have to make sure they're zipped up prior to bringing that file into Slingshot. You can't just bring in the raw files. They have to be zipped up, and you can zip more than one RX map together, but you do got to make sure you got all the correct files are all together in that file. So you can do one at a time as a zip file, or you can do them all as a zip file. Next question, what is Grand 3 used for? The difference in the granular types, we got Grand 1, Grand 2, all the way through Grand 5. Grand 4 and Grand 5 are for future air seeder applications, different product types. Most of your machines out there, you're going to see either probably Grand 1 or Grand 3. Some of the micro bends might utilize Grand 2. So Granular 1 is a single belt, single encoder. We got one rate encoder and we got one belt. Typical of a spinner application or kind of like your air spreads from AGCO. Grand 2, that's two belts, still only one encoder, two drive units, one encoder. Some of your micro bends kind of fall into this category. Grand 3, That's where we got 2 belts in the bed for each product. So you got dual belts, and we have an encoder on each belt. Each one has its independent encoder. Grand 3 systems are going to be like your AGCO Air Max, Case Flex Airs, and there's a couple spinner manufacturers that do utilize this where they got dual belts on the bottom. We also talked when we're in Grand 3, we also have that dual flow percent. That's where that dual flow percent comes into. Even though that's available in other settings, it's only utilized in Grand 3. So when we are running in Grand 3, we're only reading off one encoder when both belts are running, and we check to the second encoder, and this is the alarm for error. 50% is kind of a default that Raven puts in there. Your equipment manufacturer may have a specific number that they recommend you to put in there. Next question, if an RX file has an outside of the boundary or RX map value associated with it, will the rate work, or do you have to have the outside boundary entered in manually? So if we got outside of a boundary, if we're actually using the boundary, if you want to apply outside the boundary, you're going to have to disable AccuBoom if you're using it. To apply outside the RX map, that is where we're going to set that default rate value, which is going to be normally 0. This is that default rate per acre, right above the boom center. So I can put 100 in there, and as I showed you before, I am outside of my map. Remember I drove off my RX map we showed you before? So since I'm outside my map and I put a default rate of 100 in there, my target rate is now 100. Now if I want to change that, I can go into the RX widget and change that value to something else once I'm within a job. If maybe I didn't do it when I opened the job, or there's multiple spots, multiple rates I want to apply, you can change that as you go. Next question, is there a desktop demo or simulator to download? Currently, no. What I'm using right now is I'm remoted into a Viper 4 hardware. There is no simulator. However, I think there is kind of a walkthrough spreadsheet on the public knowledge base. You see how to set up a Viper 4 demo. That's running a demo on the hardware itself. We can run it in demo mode without nodes. It's a good way to, in the off season, you can power it up in the office without any hardware there, and you can actually go through a lot of the product control settings in a demo standpoint, do a lot of file maintenance, and it doesn't affect anything in the regular operation. I can show you how to get to that. As far as if you want to run the hardware in demo, which we can do, and this is something you guys can do, you can get a power-only cable from Raven, use a power supply, DC power supply. You can set this up in the office, in the off-season, give you the ability to kind of train up. You can poke around. It doesn't mess with anything that's in the real mode, in the real operation. You can bring in boundaries, do file maintenance, do jobs from demo GPS. To get to that, we're going to have to go back to the Viper here. And if we go to this log out option, you get your users, of course the administrator, and then you can have all your different operators listed here to who's going to log in. And in the lower left corner, there's a demo. If you touch on that, it's going to give you the option to restart with enabled. So it would go into demo mode, simulate product control and everything. Next question, is there a way we can default bend chaining to product 2 to product 1? I think you're probably referring to the auto chain. Currently, no. That is something that has been requested. You may see down the road. There will be a way if you utilize AgX jobs in the future, which is our next release. If you're doing AgX jobs through SST software, that is going to be in 2.5. And with the AgX portion of that, you will be able to, when you're assigning your recommendations, you will be able to assign a chain order from that page. As far as on a non-AgX job, that's kind of on the wish list at this point. We might see down the road. For street maps, we have a question on what version of software do we need. You got to have 2.4. So if we go to System Manager, right there, 2.4. This is, like I said, beta software. Then once you get the software installed, you do have to, like I showed before, you're going to have to go to your Slingshot account, and you'll be able to create the map. You just choose your area size, or you drop a point where your starting point is, and you use the slider to create your area, and then you can name the map. So you can create multiple maps if you got different geographies, or you want a map that's maybe longer than it is taller, because it does take a while to upload these street maps to the Viper 4. I've seen it take, depends on the map size and the number of roads, anywhere from 5 minutes to up to 45 minutes in large urban areas. It can take quite a while to get that installed. Okay, to install the street maps, we're just going to go into File Manager. Once we download the file from Slingshot, it's going to create a .rsm file. You're going to copy that over your USB drive. No specific location, just put it on your USB drive. And then we can come over to File Manager, to our USB, select our USB drive, and then with 2.4, you're going to have the option for street maps. And same thing like bringing any file in, it's going to look for that RSM file that we download from Slingshot, and we can select on that file, and then once we hit the import, it's going to copy that over to your USB drive the whole time. This is where it's going to take some time for that to happen, because it's going to copy that RSM file and install it. So this is where it can take a little bit of time. Next question, is there any way to change the boom width inside a job? No, there is not. But unlike our Viper Pro, which was real finicky with boom setup, you can close a job, go into your boom setup, change your guidance width, change your boom setup. Maybe if you got that spinner machine, you got different spread widths, change that boom setup, change your machines, whatever you do, you'll still be able to go back into that job and continue application. Now, if you changed your guidance width or your boom width, you may have to recalibrate that AB line or nudge it over to the correct location once you get that job open, because that has all changed when you change your boom width. The other thing you can do, really not a question, but I'm going to touch on this. We were using product profiles. If you want to change your product profile, maybe you did part of the field with one blend and you want to switch blends on the other side of the field. For record keeping, if you close a job, you can come in here and change your product profile, and then if you go back into that job, it's going to let you continue application. It's going to give you a warning that it doesn't match. See, my current and previous don't match, and it's going to warn me, but it'll let you continue that application. So what that'll do in your reporting is we're going to split that out by different colors on your report where each different product was applied. So you have that record of where them different products were applied within that field. The next question was, what is the VT button? The VT button, we can't see anything here today, but that's our virtual terminal. The Viper 4, the newer versions, is ISO ready, so it has virtual terminal capabilities. So we can use this like our Hawkeye system, which is ISO for sprayers, or we can use a regular ISO node, or we can tie into some other manufacturers that manufacture ISO ECUs. Next question, is there a way to pull cameras up on the home page, or do we have to be in a job? Currently, with the cameras, we're using the camera interface, which we can support up to 4 cameras on the Viper 4. We do have to be in a job, unfortunately. What I'd recommend you doing, if you're going to use the camera interface, is just create a dummy job and just continue to use that job. If you want to view them cameras for driving down the road. We don't recommend opening a job up a long ways from the field and driving to it, because what that can do is it can, if you want coverage information, is it can make your coverage map on your Slingshot or your Viper 4 report very small, because we're logging that information once that job is open. So even though we're not making an application, it just makes your map a lot smaller. Question on, can I update from 1.7 question mark to version 2.4? You can go to any 2.0 version, you can go directly to 2.4. We don't have to do any steps. If you have an older Viper 4 that you're still on a 1 dot version, a version 1 something, then that'll be a step process, because we got to do an operating system update to 2.0, and then we can update from that point to 2.4. Currently, the only one that you can update right now to the 2.4 street maps is a case Viper 4. They are brand specific for the software. If you would like the street maps and you have a case Viper 4, contact your dealer. They can talk to Case and get an exception, and then they can contact us, and we can probably get them a version of software for you to run on that case Viper 4. But we'd like to have Case to give an exception, that because it's a feature you guys want. Sometimes they'll let that happen. So work with your dealer on that. Can we merge coverage wireless between machines? Machine-machine communication? Currently, no.